reasons that we want a full court press is there's three mainly. The first one is to control the tempo of the game. Whether you want to speed up the game, you want to slow the game down, having a full court press of some kind can be extremely beneficial. So when I talk about speeding up the game, it's a lot of times coaches do that to try to make sure that they're wearing teams out, that they're getting them out of control and a pace they're not used to playing in, to create turnovers and just to kind of create havoc. So that can be a very, good way to do it, but it's not the only way. The second thing is to slow the game down. Is if the game is at a point where it's getting too fast, you can combat a team that presses you with a press of your own to try to slow it down. The other thing is the end of a game, you can use it to try to slow down an attack. So let's say there's only 30 seconds left in a game and it's a 4-point ball game, you're up by 4. Using a press to slow them down means they have less opportunity to score. They have less opportunity to get down the floor quickly and to set up an offense, that kind of thing. So you can use it both ways. And I think there are multiple defenses that can do both. A lot of it depends on how you want your players to play. If you tell your players to stay off, so we're staying off 6, 8, 10 feet, we're just keeping that ball handler or the team in front of us, then we're working on slowing it down. If we want to speed them up, we want to be roughly an arm's length away, but we don't want to get beat. Don't let their hips and their shoulders past us. So even if you're just picking up full court with a point guard, and that's your full court pressure that you're going to put on them, is are you speeding them up? Or are you slowing them down? And do your players know which one you want to do? Okay. The next thing is that you want to get the ball out of the primary ball handler's hands. A lot of times the ball is thrown into the point guard who makes 90% of the decisions, 90% of the time, and it gets them into the offense, and that's who the coach is talking to. Well, what happens to that team if that person does not have the ball in their hands? And I think that's something that coaches miss in the transition defense game sometimes, is they allow the other team to get the ball to their best ball handler, their best decision maker, kind of the general on the floor, and then they wait for them down at the 3-point line or maybe the volleyball line right above the 3-point line. And that's when they're going to pick them up. Well, by that time, it's too late. That player has scouted the entire floor, and they know exactly where the players are at. They know exactly where the defense, how they're set up 2-3, man-to-man, 1-3-1, whatever it is, and they can kind of pick and choose what they want to do. The coach has time to look at that and survey it, and then they can choose exactly what they're going to do and to try to attack it. So full court pressure can get the ball out of the best player, the best decision maker's hands, best ball handler's hands, and get it into somebody else and makes them make decisions. Even if they're throwing it from the point guard to, say, the 2 guard, the shooting guard, that player doesn't mean that they're a poor ball handler, but how many times have they started the offense? Have they run the show? Have they handled pressure? Or a lot of teams, any kind of press, they start to do a piston action coming up from the half court into the gap, into the middle. Well, if that's a 4 or a 5 man who's running the piston action into that big gap, how many times does a 4 or 5 man run the offense? I love it when I see teams run that piston action with their guys from half court whenever we press, because I know as soon as the ball's passed to the middle, that player is not comfortable, because the 4 and the 5, if they were good at ball handling and they're good at pressure, they would be the 1, 2, or the 3. So that's kind of part of why we press, and we try to get teams to put it to a decision maker and a ball handler hands who's not used to it. And then the third way is you make the other team practice against something different. If a team doesn't practice against something new or something different for you, then they just consistently do the same thing over and over. When I first took over at Otsego, the only press that we ever saw in my first year was a 2-2-1. And it was easy to plan for because every team seemed to do that ran it. They did very similar things with the 2-2-1. I didn't have to go for a 1-2-2. I didn't have to practice against a 2-1-2. I didn't have to practice against a man-to-man. So it was really easy for me to put the game plan in for the 2-2-1 towards the beginning, and then we just reviewed it every time we had an opponent who did it. Make them practice against something different. If every team runs a 2-2-1, choose something different. Sometimes pick up full court and then 3/4 court, then half court. Switch it up, because that means that's practice time that the other team has to spend trying to figure out how they're going to beat you in the wrinkle that you put in. So those are three reasons, coaches, to go ahead and use the full court press, even if you don't want to do it full time as your main thing. There are good reasons to have it kind of in your repertoire, in your back pocket, so you can pull it out when you're ready.